Hello and welcome back to another Let's Make a Minecraft Mini CTM. As always, Rock here, and it's been a little bit since our last episode. I didn't get an episode last Thursday because I was planning to do a bit more off-screen stuff and have something presentable for today. However, I was stricken with a little bit of a food poisoning this weekend, so unfortunately I was unable to do as much as I would have liked to. I did get a little bit done, which I will be showing off soon, which this little crack here will lead to. But we're going to go into talking a little bit more about stuff today, as well as, I guess, a little bit of terraforming discussion and the spawn area discussion. So that's the agenda for today. I don't know if today's episode is going to be is going to be that long. It might be a shorter of an episode, but that is the kind of the things I would like to discuss today. So from last time, we had a little bit of a few comments that were regarding what the third dungeon of the map, the mini CTM, is going to be. We had one comment that was suggesting in regards to having twisty-turny maze type area where it leads through technically like a think of like the internal organs of a monster or a person, and it leads into the heart, where the heart is the boss battle where you get your wool kind of thing. So that was an idea. We also had someone that was saying that their favorite out of the current remaining was the boneyard. So the boneyard, let's label this with a different color other than, where's the hard clay? Let's label this with this light blue. So this is a potential, I think. I still don't know if we're dedicated to the boneyard as our third area. There's definitely some thought that needs to go into it. So again, like I ask with anything, if you guys have any suggestions or ideas for the third potential area, or at least, if you guys like the boneyard as a potential third area or third dungeon, if you have any suggestions as to sub areas within this boneyard, feel free to give any ideas. Else, if you have ideas of the overall area and sub areas within that, feel free to give suggestions for those as well. But I'm not gonna set in stone what our third area is just yet until we discuss it and talk about it a bit more. Now, aside from that, I've been thinking about our areas a bit more. I'm liking how the discussion with the Catacombs area is overall. I haven't jotted down any more additional notes, but there is some gameplay mechanics that I did hear mention of that I did think about, and we'll do a little prototyping of in a second. But the Catacombs overall is going to have a multitude of areas, kind of a poisony swamp, which will be more probably a sunken watery area. We'll have the catacombs themselves and different parts like that. So we've got some good feedback as to areas such as that. The pirate ship area. Now this is one of the areas that I think is probably going to be the most difficult to get done well. I did quite a bit of research into shipbuilding and pirate shipbuilding, and this is where things get bad because there's not really many, or at least any, ship design videos that go that do a good job at describing, at least that I saw. There could be some videos out there for Minecraft that maybe I missed, but I had a hard time finding videos that described a good process as to building pirate ships or ships in general. So maybe if you guys have ideas or know of videos, or maybe you find videos that have a good tutorial as to building ships or pirate ships, or galleons and different ships like that, where it contains tutorials on how to build the whole construction itself, that would be very useful. But I'm very unfamiliar with ship design and pirate ship design, galleon design, just ship design in general. So this is an area of expertise I'm not familiar with. And even some of the videos that I did see that were kind of describing how to build them, it was a very... they weren't very good at describing how to build them or the proper method to build them, which in general would be, from what I understand, you're building the spine of the ship, which is... I don't remember exactly what it's called. I want to say it is... No, it's not the hull. The hull is the whole bottom of the ship. I don't remember exactly what it is, but you're building the spine of the ship, and then you're building ribs of the ship off of that, and then you're filling in the walls of the outer edges of the ship, and then you're going in from there. I had a hard time finding a tutorial that actually kind of went through that kind of process of how to actually build the ship and the proper ways to build the ship so that you could, create variety in your ships. I found a video that had a layer by layer building of it, which is not I wouldn't say is the proper way to build the ship. Is building the horizontal layer by layer of it. But I guess it is a potential way to do so. So if all else fails, I might go along with that kind of tutorial and use World Edit or something to copy and paste all the layers into an actual ship. But that's not something I would like to do. I would actually like a tutorial of some type that actually builds the ship and actually build it myself. But that is not something that I found. So if you guys have suggestions or ideas, or know of ways to properly build a ship in Minecraft, at least to a reasonable scale, something, along the lines of 28, 30, 35 roughly blocks long, that would be very helpful, as it's not something I've had very good luck kind of discovering, which will lead to our intersection design as well. But there's a lot of design that relates to that ship design stuff. So if you guys have ideas or know of tutorials that actually teach you how to build the ship properly, feel free to leave a comment down below. So after that, I think let's go into this real quick before we go into the little test world thing I wanted to do for the Catacombs with the poisoned area. So as you can see, this little cutout in the ground here. I didn't get quite as much done as I wanted to. Well, I didn't get much done compared to what I wanted to, just because of the food poisoning. But I started work on the spawn area. It's definitely a very rough cutout of the spawn area. There needs to be a lot more terraforming done to the area, but I think it's a good basic cutout of the area. We have our center area here. I'll definitely be cutting out a little bit more of the open top area there once we're done with that top area there. But in general, this will be our spawn area, and if the player ends up spawning up there, we'll have some command blocks to teleport them down here. But we're definitely going to have to smooth out some of the ground here. But definitely, I think this is roughly the size that we're going to want our spawn area to be. And the big thing with this spawn area is that it's going to be kind of fully encompassing of all the things that we're going to want for the map. So we're going to have the entrances to the 3 dungeons here. I don't know where particularly, but we're going to have the entrances to the 3 dungeons here. I'm thinking that maybe we'll have our monument here. We'll have our traders here. Is this going to be kind of the all-encompassing area? We'll have farms, kind of anything you can think of as a base kind of thing that you would want in your kind of your home point of maybe we'll have the setup for an area where you can set up your enchanting tables. We can have an area, I'm not sure, traders, the monument, stuff like that. I think an all-encompassing area of pathways to the dungeons, and then kind of this central hub area where it has all the other things that we need. So there definitely needs to be some more terraforming work to be done to this. But I will go over, before we get into the test world stuff, a little bit over how I ended up doing a lot of this terraforming. So this terraforming was done in Bucket. I had a few questions on, not last episode, but the episode of before, of what version of Bucket we were using and such. We are using Bucket for 1.8. Unfortunately, I don't know the complete process of building for 1.8 for Bucket. There is a way to do so. I believe if you go on Spigot, the Minecraft Spigot, S-P-I-G-O-T, I think that's how it's spelled. They have a build process that you can do to compile a version of, I think, Bucket for 1.8. My server provider, BeastNode, does have a kind of a, I guess, a build of 1.8 for Bucket that they did on there. So that's what I'm using. But for you guys who aren't using BeastNode, unfortunately, I think you guys would have to compile 1.8 for yourselves. But I am using 1.8 Bucket, so I do have access to all of the lovely 1.8 blocks, sea lanterns, dark prismarine, bricks, prismarine, etc. But for you guys who aren't using it, I think you would have to look into compiling 1.8 for yourself in order to use the same stuff. For the rest of the plugins, it's simply just doing a Google search on Voxel Sniper, which I'm using, I think, the 1.7.2 version of Voxel Sniper. NBT Edit, I'm using 1.8. There's a 1.8 Bucket version, I believe, which, from what I've seen, has some issues with villager trade MBT editing. So that's a bit of an issue, but for everything else it works fine as far as I've seen. And World Edit, I think I'm using 1.7.2. There might be a 1.8 version, but I'm not sure. And if I am using the 1.8 version, I'm it's been a while since I've updated all this stuff. But so this is, I think this is the good size for pretty much our spawn area overall for the map. So what I'm thinking is that 3 of these directions, I don't know which 3, but 3 of the directions are going to have kind of entrance ways into the areas. So one is going to have maybe a half a pirate ship that's kind of eroded and broken, and you're going to end up climbing into the pirate ship and going into the area. So the pirate ship area is you're gonna climb into a half a pirate ship and go into the area. For the Catacombs area, there's gonna be some type of ruins or kind of an overall catacomb. You can't see my hands, but I'm kind of making shapes with it. But there's gonna be, a mausoleum, for example. There'll be, a mausoleum that you'll go in that will lead into the area. And for the third area, I haven't really decided because we haven't discussed the third area, but the third area would have some type of entrance way that would lead into it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with these general cardinal directions is that there's going to be some type of structure that will lead into the area. Think of it like a dungeon kind of thing. And I'm going to have to investigate more into it, but I believe I was seeing some videos on YouTube about making a circular portal, quote-unquote portal entrances, or at least it looked like a portal. So I'm going to have to double check on those videos and see if I could see them. And if I can, it might be a thing of using those circular portal entrances as a teleporter into an area. So it could potentially be, we have a broken pirate ship over here that has a circular portal, kind of like a dungeon in an MMO. And if you get close enough to it, it teleports you to the correct location. So that could be a potential idea that we could use if it works like I thought it would. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on it, but we'll see. But let's get up here. I'm going to do a little bit of talking about how I did the terraforming of this area. It's rather straightforward and simple. I'll put my fingers on the right keys. It's rather straightforward and simple how I did the terraforming on this. It's just a matter of knowing the commands. Now, I have Voxel Sniper, I have Bucket, or not Voxel, Bucket. I have Voxel Sniper, I have World Edit, and that's pretty much the gist of what I need. So let's get over here to a place that's probably good. So the three things that I use to terraform this general spawn area is Voxel Sniper, World Edit. World Edit's Fill, and World Edit's Erode. So for Voxel Sniper, we have the simple command of B, which is the brush, what type of brush we want to use. So we're going to use a blob brush, and we're going to use a blob brush of size 5. For bigger areas, a bigger brush is usually better. It kind of clears out the area better. If you're doing a smaller area, a blob brush of maybe size 3 is good. So size 5 is something like that. It's got a 5 radius, and a blob brush, what it does is it kind of randomly, it's not circular in fashion, you know. So if I did a blob, blob B, ball brush. So that is right there a circular brush right here. That's a ball brush. It's very uniform. It is a 5 radius, and it has always the same shape. So that's, you know, one of the problems that I find with ball brushes is it has a uniform shape, and you can easily tell if an area has been cleared with a ball brush. It's kind of like when you use NB MC Edit and you use some type of shape brush and carve out an area, you can easily tell that there's a pattern with it. That's one of the big things with humans and their brains and stuff, is that we have an easy time detecting patterns. So using a uniform brush like that is a good way for a player to look at something and go, you know, there's the obvious brush stroke there. That's one thing with map making, is you can, you know, people can see stuff and go, oh, look at that obvious brush stroke. But a blob brush, you can look at these and go, these two brushes are completely different. There's something with them. There's no obvious pattern within these. I put 3 brushes here. There's no obvious pattern. It kind of looks, to some extent, natural. A player could look at this and would not know that there's, you know, there was any brush strokes with this. It looks more of a natural eroded. Well, this right here looks kind of brush strokey, but if you look at the outsides, it doesn't look very brush strokey. It looks kind of sort of natural. And there's ways to get around this sort of brush strokey stuff right here. But let's say we blobbed a bit of stuff here. So we decided to make ourselves a little round-ish canyon area here. So as you can see here, we have some floating blocks. We have other blocks. It looks fairly natural, I would say, if you look at it in comparison. You know, if you look at, you know, in the real world, you have caverns and canyons and stuff like that. There's no flat surfaces. There's no patterns to the way stuff erodes. It's very unsymmetrical. So that's the kind of the way I like to do these things. This is why one of the big reasons why I like to do stuff in Bucket versus doing stuff in MC Edit is because with MC Edit you have a very symmetrical build to things. You have a shaped brush that you swipe around, and it makes a very symmetrical shape around it. This is kind of the big difference between maps of you know, old CTM maps versus newer Minecraft CTM maps. Is the old Minecraft CTM maps didn't have this option to really make these more natural walls versus today's Minecraft maps, which, you know, you have the ability to make these more natural walls. Which, look at these walls, to some extent they feel more natural, at least environmental wise, than you would in an old map. I mean, you do have these sharp edges which are easily fixable, which I'll fix real quick, but that is the first tool, the blob brush. This is I think one of the most important brushes that you can deal with when you're making terraforming or trying to make natural terraforming in the way that I do terraforming in CTMs. I mean, this process is going to take longer because you can't do as easily as large of areas as you would in MC Edit. However, I think it does make for a more natural look, which, I mean, that big canyon that I showed you over there took about 40-45 minutes to carve out and smooth out the way I did, versus, you know, something that might have taken, you know, 5-10 minutes in MC Edit of just using brushes to carve out an area. But you can obviously see a difference between kind of a jaggedy, more natural looking area versus kind of just a carved out area with a brush. So once we have this blobbed out area and we have, you know, all of these floating blocks and all of these kind of sharp corners, what can we do next? Well, there's two commands that I like to use when doing my terraforming. We have the erode brush, which is the build commands erode brush, which we go CS build for build commands, which is CS is for craft script and B is for the build commands. Then we can do a erode, and right there by itself, that is the erode command. I like to take it a little bit further and expand upon it by using F2. F is the command for faces. This means that it only affects blocks that have at least 2 faces visible. The default, from what I understand, with erode is 3 faces. That means if a block has 3 faces visible, it will use the erode on those. I like to use 2 because it gives a more natural erode for me. So if I use for this, I can kind of easily erode away surfaces to make a more natural looking area. So I like to use that to clear away floating blocks. I also like to use it just to kind of smooth out areas. I mean, that was a sharp corner there, but now look, it's kind of a smoother corner. We have a sharp corner here, and we have a bit smoother of a corner. So it's with 2 faces, it does make things a lot smoother. Now we can kind of go the inverse here. So we have a erode. We also have a fill functionality, so we can do CS build fill. Now, much like the erode, I like to use a face of 2. So if a block has at least 2 faces visible, we can do a fill command off of those. By default, again, I think it's a fill 3, but I like to use fill 2 to have a more, I guess, balanced fill. So we have this corner. It's a pretty sharp corner. However, we could do, you know, a fill command here. We can swipe around a little bit, and that feels less sharp, less jaggedy. And this is one of the things of why I like to use the blob brush, because if you have a very uniform shape, something that's symmetrical, say for example you're using a ball brush, if you do in a particular spot with a fill or a road, it's a very predictable pattern. So if you use that fill and a road over a consistent pattern, it's not going to give you a very inconsistent result. It's going to be very uniform, very consistent, and it's not going to look very good. It's not going to look very random. So with that blob brush, like I was showing, you know, we have a very random pattern. I mean, it does have that you know, that radius that we were talking about, or the, not, is it the radius? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Has the, is that the radius? Radius is half. Diameter is the whole thing, yeah. So it has a radius of 5 still. However, it's not a consistent, you know, consistent shape, like I was saying before. So because it doesn't have, oh, let me redo that. Because it doesn't have a consistent shape, the erode and fill are going to work differently on each one, in comparison to every other one. So, you know, I could run this wall right here, I can run the erode tool all around the wall, and there's not going to be a consistent pattern. It's going to look natural. It's going to look as if you went into a cave system kind of thing in the real world. There's no consistency. There's no patterns. It's chaos, and in a sense, of the walls and how they look. So with me, at least when it comes to building with my bucket tools, a lot of it comes down to feeling things out, looking at it, what looks weird, what looks inconsistent kind of thing. You know, I could look around the wall here and I can go, what looks out of place, what looks like it's not natural. You know, this corner right here might be a little unnatural, so I might hit it with an erosion, and that feels a bit better. You know, continue around what feels unnatural. At this point, I think the walls feel a bit good. Maybe right here doesn't feel as natural. And there is another technique that I do like to use when I'm kind of coming in here, especially if I'm eroding. I might punch out a few blocks, because that does make things a bit more random when it comes to erosion. So I can throw an erosion tool in here, and suddenly the wall is a bit more unnatural. It feels, well, maybe not unnatural, but a bit more natural. It feels like it's something you would see in real life kind of thing. So that is how I kind of go about doing the walls and the ceilings. The floor is a bit different. I'll get back into that as I'm working on this spawn area. But I think in general, this is a good way to carve out your area as a whole to give it a more natural feel. I mean, at least as a initial first pass shaping, this feels much more natural as an area versus something that's just like a large, you know, circular brush. Maybe that's the horizontal is much larger than the vertical kind of thing. So overall, that is the techniques I used to carve out this spawn area right here. It was a lot of blob brushing around to get a general size of it, and then going around with our road brushes, which we still definitely have some more work on it. And like I was saying, a lot of it is coming down to just feeling it out, looking around, seeing what feels off, you know, and then eroding it, filling it, playing with it until it feels good. Maybe placing a few blocks so that I can erode or fill it in to make it feel better. But that is the general way that I went about crafting this spawn area. So you should get a general idea from that little short tidbit of a tutorial on how to do it. Now, there was one gameplay mechanic that I did get a suggestion for, or kind of a general idea for, of a poisoned area, which would probably be in the Catacombs. A poisoned area where you have to get into certain areas in order to continue going through. Now this, to some extent, reminds me a bit of Ragecraft 2 in one of the areas where you have to kill the wolves. And I'm going to jump over to my test world to show an example that I had regarding this. So I'll be right back. Alright, so we're back. Now, to note before there's any questions about it, the reason why we're over in the test world doing this command block related stuff instead of over in our Bucket world is because unfortunately, Bucket doesn't play very friendly with command blocks, and it hasn't for a long time, at least as long as command blocks have been around. So it's much easier to do stuff in a non-Bucket kind of instance of Minecraft versus doing it in a Bucket. So using our CTM test world area, it's much easier to do what we need and have things work correctly. So today we're doing a proof of concept prototype kind of thing for a poison area type of thing. And I won't be going through the whole process. I will just be doing the process of the effects for the poison type of area, and talking about what we could do to kind of make things work for the detection of this kind of thing. So let's throw down a command block. So with this type of command block, or this type of effect, we want the particle effects to be kind of a stream of particle effects that the player would walk into, and they'd get some type of quote-unquote buff that prevents them from getting poisoned, for example, for a certain amount of time. Now, we could give them some type of potion effect that, so long as the potion effect's on them, that they don't get poisoned. But I think we can have a much easier method to something like that. We could have something that is command block based, scoreboard based, and then do something based off of that. So let's say we want to have these streams of particles that if the player walks into, that they get their immunity to the poison. So how would we get these particles to play at places that we want them to? So let's say we want to use armor stands. We could have these armor stands, have them invisible, have them invulnerable so the player can't interact with them, and we could place them wherever we want. So we have these armor stands here. So these armor stands are going to be where we want our particle effects to play. Now, in a practical sense, when we would use this, we would obviously give them names. We would make them invulnerable. We would make them invisible. But for now, for this practical proof of concept, we're just going to make them regular armor stands. So let's say we want armor stands to emit particles that are particle streams that the player would walk into. Well, having some type of command that would constantly play on armor stands could be potentially lag-inducing. So we can think of one optimization to improve upon this. So let's say we want to execute at all players. So at all players, we're going to do another execute command. Execute. Luckily for us, execute can be nested, so you can execute at a player and then execute in relation to that player. So at all players, we want to do an execute command at all entities of the type armor stand within a radius of, for this example, we'll just say 10, within 10 radiuses, 10 radii of the player. We're going to do another execute. Hold on, my little notes here backwards. Okay, yeah, I got this. Execute here. At this point, we're going to play a particle. We'll play the explode particle, and we're going to do a few values that unless you're familiar with the syntax for the particle command, you'll be unfamiliar with. But the first three values right here are the position, at least the relative position of where the effect will get played. The next three right here are the bounding volumes of the effect. So 0.5 blocks on the X and Z, and 4 blocks up. As for the next command, I think it's, I don't remember what this one is. This 10 is how many particles play per tick. 0.5, I don't remember, and the 1, I don't remember. So we have our basic execute command that wherever we put these armor stands, we'll have these streams play up, so long as we're within 10 radii of them. Should we not be within 10 radii of them, we won't play. And this is kind of an optimization in general, as we only want the streams to play so long as we're within a certain radius of these. Now, this is kind of something that, as we build the areas and we place our shapes of what the quote-unquote streams will stream out of, kind of the frames of the streams, you know, say we have, I don't know, something like, obviously it's not going to be like that, but say we have something like that with I don't know, something like this. I'm making things more difficult than it used to be. Something like this. Say, for example, it looked like this. We would only want those streams to play with when we're within a certain radius. And this is something we can play around with as we're building the areas and placing the streams, just to make sure that so long as they're visible with it, we're quote-unquote within range of them. And we can play with the range value in general. But it's more or less an optimization in order to make it so that these particle effects only play so long as we're within range. And we're not, you know, meaningless. We're not playing them unnecessarily. So that is kind of the proof of concept for the particle streams. We definitely could tweak the values, maybe make them more particles playing up, but that does give a sense of kind of the particle streams. And obviously these armor stands would be invisible and invulnerable, so you wouldn't see them, you would just see the particle streams. So how would we make the player immune to poison, say, with you know, in this type of area? So what we would do is we would do somewhat of an inverse. So the way we have these particle streams right now is we check at we execute at all players within a certain radius of within a certain radius. All armor stands will emit particles. So what we would do in contrast to that is that we would execute at all armor stands of a certain name. Obviously we would name these armor stands a certain name so that it doesn't affect all armor stands in general. But at the executing at all armor stands of a certain name within a certain radius of them, all players would get some type of scoreboard score set of them. So some immunity score, for example, set on them. And then every tick, for example, we would reduce the score by 1. You know, if we look back at ticks, there's 20 redstone ticks within a second. So this fill clock right here will tick 20 times a second, which is why there's so many particles here versus just a normal clock. But this fill clock right here ticks 20 times a second, which means for every 1 second there's 20 counters. So say we wanted the effect to last 5 seconds, we would, if a player is within a certain radius of these armor stands, ultimately we would set their poison immunity to 100, and then every tick we would deduct it. If pretty much every tick we would deduct it. And if they were within the range, it would just get reset to 100 kind of thing. So we would set their immunity to 100, so long as they weren't within. Excuse me. So long as they weren't within the range of the armor stand, it will continue to deduct. And once it is not within, they're not within that radius. If their scoreboard value for their immunity is 0 or less. You pretty much can go ahead and just consistently set the player's, potion effect to poison with a 1 tick or a couple ticks kind of thing. So ultimately, we can use scoreboards for this kind of thing. If the player is within an area, if they don't have an immunity to the poison, and their immunity score is less than some amount, they get a poison effect consistently applied to them. If they are within that area and their immunity is above a certain amount, they won't get that applied to them. So this is kind of the mechanic that we could use in a particular subsection within the Catacombs, is having these. We have these immunity vents that the player would run into. They would get their buff applied to them, and then they would have to run through and go through. Now, I was thinking of a potential way to visualize this to the player. I'm going to have to do a bit more research on this, but from what I understand, we could potentially use world bounds. I'm trying to, what is it? It's bounds. We have what is it? It is world border. We could, as far as I know, we could potentially use the world border. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to work if you have a multiple people playing the map. I'd have to double check and test it, but we could potentially use world border as a way to have the red effect go on the screen. So once your timer gets lower than a certain amount, we could have the world border redness show on the player that their immunity from the poison is getting too low before they start taking damage. That is an option. It's definitely something we're going to have to test, because I'm not sure how it's going to work overall, but it is an idea. But I think that's going to do it for today. That's kind of my tutorials and ideas and creations that I think I can think of for today. So, as always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or feedback, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. As always, this is Rock, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!